everybody. Welcome to another episode of Two Rivers Tuesday.
Hey.
I'm trying to mix it up. That's the last time I'll try to mix it up. I'm going to make you do the intros for the rest of the time.
Wonderful.
All right, I'm here with John Teague. How are you, John?
I'm doing well. I'm sorry. I just totally made fun of you. And it's going to be stuck there forever.
That's all right. I can take it.
Yeah.
All right, we're sitting here a little nervous because we have a mysterious unopened card and box in front of us.
It was labeled TRT.
Yes.
Which we can only assume is Two Rivers Tuesday.
Yeah. So we do know that Meredith Feldman put this box on the table this morning and asked us to open it on the podcast. We have no idea what's in this card.
This is a live unboxing.
Or what's in this box.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, she is so thoughtful. She says, happy 50th episode. Who knew this was our 50th episode?
Meredith did.
We love Two Rivers Tuesday. This is so great.
This is fun.
Thanks for helping your family consider more deeply the implications and applications of God's word. Dwight, Shaq, and Abominable Snowman ain't got nothing on you. All right, I'm going to let you unbox.
Okay, here we go.
We're lifting the box.
Oh
my gosh!
What? That is
my goodness.
Hilarious. We have our own bobbleheads, Maggie.
I am stunned.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
I cannot believe this.
Oh my gosh.
Can I look at myself? Okay.
Yeah, please.
Oh, the detail. Okay, she has my gold necklace on here. And she has your Tennessee polo on here and your glasses.
And a 2RC mug. I'm drinking a 2RC coffee mug.
And she even has your facial hair.
The facial hair is on there. Yeah.
I cannot believe this.
That is impressive. Wow. I am amazed.
Okay, Meredith Feldman gets Best Two Rivers Tuesday fan award of all time.
That's pretty incredible. And
this
shout
is amazing.
out, or maybe just say sorry to everyone who's not watching this
Yes.
and only listening to this. Yeah. There you go. Wow. That's awesome. Our own,
Thank you,
our
Meredith.
very own bobbleheads for this podcast.
Will they always be here? I feel like they should just be permanent.
I feel like they should always be there.
They can be accompanied by a guest, but they will stand there.
Yes, that's right.
That is so amazing. Thank you, Meredith. All right, if you're listening to this, check out the YouTube so that you can see a picture of the Maggie and John Teague bobbleheads.
That's right.
This is so great.
Very fun.
All right, well, let's jump into the sermon from Sunday. You talked about Galatians 6. This is our last sermon in Galatians, so the series is done.
That's right.
How do you feel about it?
Gosh, I think it was a really good series for us as a church. I think, when we were going into it, I was like, okay, this will be good. I think this is what we're supposed to do. It's what we're supposed to study. And over time, it's become one of my favorite books to study.
Yeah.
And so I've heard a lot of good feedback from folks who have learned a lot from walking through Galatians.
Yeah, it's been such a joy just to hear the gospel over and over again and looking at it from so many different angles. The conversations in life group have been so good. So sad it's over, but excited for what's next.
Yeah.
All right. So on Sunday, you talked about 3 main points. The first one was how Paul is telling the Galatians to support the ministry of the word. And so share all good things with the one who teaches. So we'll talk a little bit about that, even though I know it's not your favorite.
Yeah.
So what are some of the ways that people have kind of done this for you? What are some of the things they've done that make you feel like they're in the trenches with you, partnering with you, and sharing good things with you?
The very first thing that comes to my mind is just words of encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
I just, when someone shares, and we have some incredible encouragers in our church, which is a true gift of grace. It is a spiritual gift from the Spirit of Christ. And when someone says, hey, thank you for, pointing this aspect out, in God's word or in the gospel or about who he is or calling us to this is so important and God's speaking to me through this. I feel like, hey, we're in this together.
Yes.
We're in this together. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the ways. There's just words of encouragement. I think another thing is when someone says, hey, can I do that like for you? Or, when someone asks, can I take something off your plate? Or, hey, can I lead this something, that like, it's great when someone comes to me with an idea about something they feel like the Lord's put on their heart, and they're not dropping it off on my desk. They're like, hey, I want to do it. I just want to get your thoughts on it. Is it okay if I run this out? It's like, yeah, we're partners in the gospel together.
Yes.
Right? So I love that.
Yeah, those are good. I just love and I'm so encouraged when I see other people doing ministry, like similar to what you're saying. Like, it's such a joy when people don't just look to us as like the paid ministers to do the ministry. Like, they take it upon themselves. They take the initiative to do ministry themselves and to like love on people and to pursue people. Like, just yesterday, I'm in the lobby and I overhear a woman like asking for a guest number, and they're gonna get coffee, and it's like, it was my mom, Susan House. She's asked, there's a new visitor, and she's like, hey, let me get your number, let's get coffee. And that makes me feel like she's in the trenches with us, because she's not just like, hey, Maggie, you should get coffee with her. She's taking it upon herself to do ministry with us. And that's
beautiful example,
such a picture of what so many people in our church family do. They're not just looking to us, but they know that they're saints that have been equipped for the work of ministry, and they can do it also.
That's beautiful. And I need to say that, and someone may be listening that this relates to. I joked about, but kind of not jokingly, said that part of all good things had to be salsa.
Absolutely.
I think that was in the original language. It was the word for salsa, and someone from the church texted me Sunday evening and said, hey, I got some salsa for you.
That's amazing.
And I was so excited.
Yep, that's your love language.
Oh man, it so is.
Also, what Meredith did, like, I feel like doing ministry can be heavy and serious.
Yeah.
And so the people in my life that just bring joy and fun and make me laugh, that is such a ministry to me. So just Meredith, like, making these bobbleheads and giving us like something fun to open, and with this encouraging note, like, that is so beautiful.
I passed Meredith and Silas when I was coming into the office today, and they were leaving. They must have dropped this off, and Silas had this like mischievous grin on his face. And now I know why.
Yep.
I love
so
it.
Great. All right. Your next point in the sermon was sow to the Spirit. So kind of a theme throughout Galatians is like helping us see this picture and this battle between our flesh and the Spirit. And on Sunday, you put this picture in our minds of kind of, on one side is this like green, lavish field with like a fruitful tree, and then the other side is this just like desolate wasteland that's like dead. And so we can continue sowing into the field of the Spirit, and when we do that, we reap joy and peace and life and growth and holiness. Or we can sow to the flesh and just waste it. And so that picture is in our minds. And so you gave this principle of, we so often sow seeds of one kind and expect a harvest of another kind. And I think that's what Paul was getting at when he's saying, like, don't be deceived. God will not be mocked. Like, you can't, I guess, kind of trick him into like, here, I'm going to do whatever I want and sow to the flesh, but I'm expecting a harvest of another kind. Do you think that's kind of that God will not be mocked idea? How do you think it relates?
I totally think that's that whole God will not be mocked idea. Like, hey, don't think that if you sow one kind of seed that you get to have another kind. I actually read someone else say something to this effect, and they were it was provocative language, but it was like something to the effect of, where in the Bible does it say that trifling with God gets you God? Which is very a provocative statement, right? And I think that if we're humble enough to consider that, like, there is a lot of maybe trifling with God in our culture today, maybe even a little bit in our own hearts.
Yeah.
Like, what gives us the idea that that gets us God?
Yes.
So if you think about it like that, when you read that verse, do not be deceived. God will not be mocked. And then Paul says, what you sow, you will reap, or you reap what you sow, right? Okay. So I think that that's a That's one way to think about it, right? So we need to think about the kinds of seeds that we're sowing,
Yep.
because that's what we're going to reap. Now, thank God for the gospel. Jesus Christ sowed the ultimate seeds of righteousness, and through faith in him, we have his righteousness.
Yes.
But I don't think that means that just automatically, like that just like we still have to sow the right seeds in our lives, right?
Yes. Yeah. The gospel is like, because of Jesus, ultimately you will not reap what you have sown.
Yes.
Because we have sinned and we're broken, but because of him, I'm not going to receive the punishment that I deserve.
Yeah.
He took that on. And the principle is still true.
Yes.
And in this life, we will reap what we have sown.
Yes.
God is gracious, but it's still a principle that we will live. So let's talk a little bit about like, what are some of those seeds that we sow, and then we're kind of surprised when we get a harvest that's not matching what we've sown.
Yeah. So when I sow the seeds of, just pounding empty carbs, like all the time, and just going for the easy food in the pantry, and not doing the hard work of eating the healthier option. I shouldn't be surprised when I reap a harvest of not being in the best shape.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I wanted to talk about that one because I feel like we forget that our bodies and the way we treat our bodies and the way we steward our health has such implications on our ability to fight the flesh.
Yeah.
Because I feel like so often I skip a meal, drink too much coffee, like am not stewarding my health well. And then I'm like, feel like my heart is racing, and I feel a little more anxious, and I feel more irritated towards everyone around me.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, I was, I guess, sowing seeds into the flesh and like not stewarding that well. And that's just not helping me get the harvest that I'm looking for.
That's right. That's a good way to put that. I think another one is, this is one we were talking about before we kicked this off. And this may feel a little on the nose and close to home, but I'll say it about myself because it is very true of me. I can't sow seeds of always being on my phone at home, and then when I reap a harvest like of my kids always being on their phone, like I can't be, for some reason I'm surprised, I'm appalled, I'm frustrated by that when my kids are always on their phones when they see me always on my phone.
Yeah.
So that's a teenager probs.
Yes. Well, I feel like I'm not in the like kids have phones era of my life yet. But I feel like when I sow seeds of always being on my phone, I'm surprised when I reap a harvest of feeling disconnected from my husband. And it's like, well, I just spent this whole car ride on my phone instead of engaging in conversation with him that would have made me feel more connected to him and things like that. So I think it's just the choices we make and the things that we do are either sowing to the flesh or they're sowing to the spirit, and just like seeing that dichotomy is so helpful. But I think too, with parenting, so often the harvest we reap of our kids' behavior, we just have to be asking the question, like, have I sown into that? Like, this is what we're getting. What have I done to like get this result? We are seeing this in our kids, like in both good and bad ways. Like when you're in those little years, like there's just constant discipline and constant like having to sow into the field of the spirit means I have to address all of those little behaviors. And so when I do that, and when I do that hard work, I later on, and sometimes it feels like forever, but I'm starting to see it as Ellis is getting older and older, I start to get to reap a harvest of like her obeying and her being more pleasant to be around, and like her being so enjoyable because we put in that hard work of discipline. But I think it goes the other way of like when I sow into my flesh of like not addressing a behavior or taking the easy way out or just wanting to be on my phone instead of having the hard conversation with her, then I reap a harvest of like more disobedience and more unpleasantness. And so I think the encouragement to parents is like, what kind of seeds are you sowing into your kids, and remembering that there probably will be a delay in the harvest,
Yeah.
but just trusting God that like hopefully you will one day get to see the fruit of that.
Yeah.
And I think we all have to remember like we trust God with the harvest, because
Yeah.
it can be so easy to get frustrated or discouraged or just grow weary in doing good, which is what you talked about. But at the end of the day, he is the God of the harvest, and we trust him with it, whether we get to see that soon or in a long time.
I think that delay is a principle that can be applied in planting any seeds, but doesn't it seem like weeds always grow a lot faster than the produce?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Gosh. Here's another one for me. I have been very aware over the last week, and this is part of the good and the bad of having to teach these things, is it kind of has to sink down into the soil of my own heart. And I have just become very aware of all the little decisions every single day. I started thinking about them in terms of like throwing seed into one field or the other, into the flesh field or the spirit field. And a lot of that for me is in like the words I choose to say. Maybe it comes out in a negative comment or in a complaint or something like that. And I have just been more aware of that and have been trying to hold those back and toss them out. And instead of like sowing into that feeling of negativity, sowing into that criticism, sowing into that complaint, that wah, you know, like, because what good is it going to do? It's going to be waste, you know, like it's not going to produce a harvest of holiness and righteousness and joy.
Yeah, that's so good. I think words are, gosh, they just come out so fast.
Yeah.
And so it just takes so much self-control, and we just so need the Spirit to help us in that. But another one kind of in that same vein that I have been convicted of, and I try to remember, but it's very hard for me, is like interrupting people. Because as I see it most clearly, like with my spouse, is that like if I interrupt Jake, in a sense, I'm saying like what you're saying is less important than what I have to say in this moment.
Yeah.
And so like, let me interject my words into this moment because they are of more value than your words.
Yes.
Like that's kind of what interrupting is saying. Is like, hey, what I have to say is more important. And so that, but like sowing into the Spirit, I think will give me the strength to like put that fleshly outburst to death of like wanting to interrupt people. And so I think that's just another example of like ways that our flesh just like so quickly sends a signal to people that their words are of less value. And so I think we can honor people by like being patient to listen and like letting them speak, letting them finish their thought before we interject our own.
Another one that you put on the list was just sowing seeds of hurry and just buzzing around everywhere and busying your day, your life, your moments, and then expecting a harvest of rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we sow seeds of over scheduling and over planning our lives and putting demands on ourselves of a level of productivity that like we're just not meant to carry, and that keeps us from having a Sabbath and like really setting a day apart to enjoy and delight in God and like enter into that rest. And then we're surprised when we feel like our world's crashing and we feel so exhausted and we feel so tired and stressed out and we're mad at everybody. But I think when we sow to the Spirit and have like true rest, that gives us strength to continue fighting this battle between the Spirit and our flesh. I think it's just so imperative that we have that. Another one I thought of was like we sow seeds of isolation, and then we're surprised when we don't have a harvest of like winning over our neighbors. So what this looks like is like when I go outside, I can see a neighbor nearby and I can either sow to the Spirit and like listen to him prompting me to like walk toward them and engage them in conversation, or I can sow into the field of the flesh and choose isolation and go back into my house and continue my to-do list.
Yes.
And so it's like we have that option in that moment. But if I want a harvest of like my neighbors coming to know Jesus or building a relationship with them, I can't continue sowing seeds of isolation and choosing to always go back into my house, always continue my to-do list. I have to sow into those relationships.
Yeah. Gosh, that just makes me think like of just how many times I complain about the harvest and don't realize that I'm just getting out what I sowed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking through this question of like, look at your life, look at the harvest that you're getting right now, and think, okay, well, what have I sown to get me this harvest?
Yes.
And asking like, okay, am I anxious? Well, what are the seeds I'm sowing that are making me kind of anxious? Am I angry? What am I sowing that's leading me to have this harvest of anger? Am I bitter? Am I exhausted? Am I apathetic? Am I jealous? Like all of these things, like when we see these things in our heart, we would be deceived to think, I have sown nothing into that field. We would be deceived to be like, well, that's, I don't know how that happened. It's like, okay,
where'd that come from?
Yes. But the truth is like that's what sin does, is it deceives us. It hardens our hearts. It blinds us to the reality that like, that's on you,
Just tell us, Maggie. Yeah. That's on you. I'm sorry.
That's on me. It's on me. So I think that's where we can kind of lean into this and engage the heart, is like, try to ask the Lord to reveal, like, where am I deceived? Where am I like not taking ownership for like, I've sown into this field. This is the harvest. Like, I want to repent of that and start sowing more into the Spirit.
Yeah.
All right. Last kind of point that you had was don't grow weary in doing good. We've kind of already talked about that, but that kind of led you into this silver chair idea. And I was thinking, is it a John Teague sermon if we don't have a Band of Brothers or C.S. Lewis quote?
I'm great with that.
They're
question.
So good.
I feel so honored by that. Yeah.
They're so good. So we had our 2024 silver chair. Remind us again about kind of what's going on in that scene.
Okay. So in the silver chair, there is this lady of the green kirtle. She's basically kind of like this book's version of the White Witch from Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. She's the bad guy. And she has taken Prince in Narnia captive and in her underground lair. And so Aslan sends some children to rescue him. And along the way, they get this guide named Puddleglum, who is a marsh wiggle. And the picture of him is great in the books. Kind of helps you picture what he must be like. And he has this real dour, kind of sour view of life. Like he's just sort of always down. Puddleglum is his, is his name. And yet he ends up being the hero in this scene. When they finally find the prince, they sort of get captured by this lady, and she starts bewitching them and enchanting them with her power and convincing them that there is no other world, that now this world that they have been in, her world, the underworld, is the only world. And then she says, there's no Narnia. There is no Aslan. And they begin to kind of just fall into her trance and start to believe it, almost to the point where they're like, yeah, I guess they even say, like, I guess there is no Narnia. This was always a figment of our imagination. There is no sun. There is no moon. There is no other world. And Puddleglum realizes it. He stomps on the fire that was creating this smoke that was, kind of like the bewitching powder. And then he's like, I don't care if it's not real. I'm going to spend the rest of my life looking for Aslan because I think he is real.
Yes.
I think there is another world.
Yeah.
And if I have to spend the rest of my life looking for it, I will.
Yes.
So I just love that scene. I'm looking for Aslan,
Yep. Yeah. I love that. I think one of the things that stood out to me from that story is that he goes and stomps on the very fire that was bewitching him.
Yes.
And I just think like, it's important to ask ourselves that question, like, what are the things I do that kind of subtly whisper to me there is no God? This is the only life there is. Like, only right now matters. Like, do what your flesh wants.
Yeah.
And, like, how can we, like, go and stomp that out? Like, cut that off. I feel like for me, the thing that comes to mind is, like, scrolling in like a shopping way of just like looking for stuff and like seeing more ways to like decorate my house or more clothes I need or like more recipes, like all of that like has its time and place. But so often if I like give my mind over to that for so long, I feel like all of that is just whispering like right now is all that matters. Getting more stuff is all that matters. There is no other life. There is nothing eternal. Like just the right now, the material, the stuff that you can hold in your hands.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
Yeah.
And I got to stomp that out.
Stomp it out. I mean, I think that a lot of the bewitching mechanism in our world right now are the screens that we hold in our hands. And so in my my time at the cell phone store, which I referenced on Sunday in the sermon, one of the conversations that I had was about someone was just sharing with me about the feed that they were getting on YouTube was just making them angry.
Yes.
Right? Like, and you begin to just get sucked in like, this is it. This is the world that we live in. And there is no other world. There is no kingdom of God at hand. Like there is no good, it's all this, and so I just need to jump into this, this grossness, the anger online, that's another example, I think, that we just kind of get sucked into the world here and forget that there is another world.
Yes, yeah. And so on the flip side, we need to be thinking through, okay, well, what are the things that remind my soul and my body and my heart and my strength that there is another life and that there is Aslan, there is a God. Like, let's go looking for him. What are those things for you that, like, when you do that, when you see that, when you experience that, it helps you more fully believe the truth?
Yeah. So we could probably go back and forth. One that just immediately comes to my mind is just worship and in particular listening to music that has its focus on God and who he is. So that helps remind me that God is present, right? And I would contrast that with some of the other music that I enjoy, but that doesn't lead me there. And I just think about, not to hate on country music, because we like country music in the Teague household. But sometimes I'm listening to these songs and I'm like, gosh, this world they live in is really sad, and it feels pretty hopeless. So I guess what they need is a bottle and a companion, or maybe like a party in a field somewhere with trucks, and that'll make them happy. And I'm like, so contrast that with then like a song that we sung on Sunday that Jesse introduced to us that I've been listening to for a month or two, like everything I need, my Father has it, so seek him. There's just a big difference there. Yeah,
that's good. I feel like for me, it's being outside. So yesterday we got to go kayaking through these like little streams, and it was shallow. So there's like these yellow wildflowers and you can like see the mountains in the back, and it was just like insanely beautiful. And you just see that and I'm like, okay, this is how beautiful God's creation is with being affected by sin. Like how much more beautiful is his world going to be when he has like redeemed all things and fixed all things and restored all of this. And so that just reminds me of like all that is to come and the beauty of who our God is and what he has made.
I love that. I think, and just because I feel like I should say this, reading the Bible.
Yes.
It feels like the church answer, but that's how I'm reminded there's another world.
Exactly.
That's what it's there for.
Yes.
Like God has revealed this to us because we need this we need this readily available to us at all times.
Yes.
We take it for granted. It's just, we've got Bibles everywhere, and it's so free and available to us, but it's there to remind us that this world is not all there is.
Yes. Yeah. And obviously the other basic answer, but like worth saying, is prayer. Like if I wake up and pray soon after waking, that sets my whole day on the trajectory of like, there is a God and it's not me. But if I start my day and just begin my day without prayer, then I kind of live that whole day trying to build my own kingdom, and I'm not in the video room.
Build your own kingdom.
Only a few people will appreciate that. But I think that basic discipline of sowing into the Spirit with Bible reading and prayer. Like there's a reason why that's the basic answer, because those two things are kind of the pillars of helping us see and believe that there is a God and that there is a life to come. So for listeners, be thinking through like, okay, what are those things that subtly whisper to you that this is the only life, and how can you stomp it out this week? And then be thinking of what are those practices that whisper to you that there is a God and that there is another life, and how can you lean more into those disciplines?
Yeah. And can I just throw one more thing? I know you're like heading to the barn here. But when Paul is saying, let's not grow weary in doing good, we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. I think there is a lot of application for just continuing to do good in the sense of like sowing the seed of the gospel, loving people, loving your neighbors, doing good, serving others, all those things. I think we could also think about this in terms of just like continuing to be obedient to God. And sometimes we grow weary of just like of fighting off our flesh, right? And this was something I didn't have time to go into, and it would have taken us down a different trail on Sunday. But I can say here, when King David in the Old Testament gave in to his flesh with Bathsheba, afterward, God sends a prophet. He sends Nathan to him, and Nathan tells that story about the sheep. You remember all this, and the whole like, you are that man, David. And David's like, oh my gosh. And then Nathan says, this is what the Lord says to you. And I'm going to have to paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me. But basically, the Lord says through the prophet to David, I did this for you. I did this for you. I did this for you. And I would have done even more. And it just gives me the feeling that if David had just not grown weary in doing good, if he had just resisted his flesh one more time, or for 5 more minutes, or had just turned away, the Lord is saying, I would have done so much more. I would have given you even more. But you but you gave in. And so, yeah, King David is sort of enshrined in he's had a heart after the Lord, and God is gracious and good, but there was a lot of hard that was harvested from his poor decisions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I just think, let's not grow weary in like continuing to fight the good fight, of not being like, okay, I'm going to re-download that app because I just want it. Or I've been doing so good. Now I'm just going to indulge my flesh, whatever that might be. I've been working so hard to hold my tongue, but I'm tired and I'm going to let it rip.
Yep.
And I just say with Paul, don't grow weary in doing good.
Yeah.
There will be a harvest.
Yes.
If you don't give up.
Yeah, that's so good. I think it's beautiful to just imagine the harvest and the fruit that God so generously is like ready to pour out on our lives.
Yeah.
And to just like imagine, like if you join him in sowing to the Spirit instead of sowing to your flesh, like all that we could possibly reap and enjoy, not just individually, but as like a whole church family, the harvest of souls, the harvest of like so many good things that the Lord is so ready and so willing to just shower us with.
Yeah.
That's beautiful to think about. All right. Well, listeners, thank you for being here, and we'll be back next week with our bobbleheads.
Oh, so good.
Bye, guys.